Now, very quickly, without further ado, let's look to connect with our reviewer who would broaden the scope of this conversation as we look to shed light on the issues in the news this morning. We're joined by the editor-in-chief of one of the newspapers earlier highlighted, the Daily Courier. The ever-mercurial, Seun Oni, like I call him, joins the program. Hello, good morning, and a happy new month to you, Mr. Seun. Welcome.
Happy new month, Mr. Brian. Thank you for having me. Always a delight to be on ADBN.
Well, thank you. Let's get straight into the conversations making the rounds. And off the back of yesterday's media chart, the FCT Minister did make some strong points as usual. Well, top of that, had to be the ground rent compliance, but it's been overtaken by conversations on the political projections going into 2027, where he vehemently endorsed President Tinubu's re-election bid to the detriment of his party, the PDP, having strong criticisms for the likes of Chief Bode George and former Governor Rotimi Amechi. Let's get your thoughts on some of the comments made by the FCT Minister.
Again, he's such a character that whether you like him or you hate him, Barrister Nyesom Wike is a sharpshooter. He's not one of the politicians who speak with his tongues hid within his cheeks. He comes out, calls it what it is, and the judgment will be left out there in the public for you to determine how you want to perceive him. And the position he took yesterday during the media parley was actually nothing new. He has made it very clear ab initio, because there was a period when people were of the opinion that he was working this hard in the FCT because he wanted to project himself going into 2027. And he came out to debunk that rumor that he was working to actually project President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to be in pole position, to have sufficient projects to show to Nigerians why going to the polls for the second tenure election. He mentioned a number of things that I think right-thinking Nigerians must not just throw the baby with the bathwater. First, about the wranglings within his own political party, the People's Democratic Party. For watchers, many had actually assumed that he had constituted himself into one of the major problems of the party. But he clearly stated his position yesterday. I know many really do not agree with what he has said because in their opinion, he ought to just resign and let the party have some breath of fresh air. But he was clear that all that he has done is to ensure that the party is placed on the path of legality. And sometimes I think the argument is there for people who have followed political issues. There seems to always be a conflict between morality and legality when you talk about political issues. For instance, go to Rivers State. Let's pick the Rivers State example that he alluded a few things to. Would you, for instance, speak against the state of emergency if on the other side, living like the governor who was suspended later came to tell the public weeks later that if that state of emergency was not imposed, there might have been a bit of chaos in Rivers State. And why Wike did not come out expressly to give us an insight into what was going on before the state of emergency was declared, he alluded to the fact that he was completely not in support of the state of emergency. He would have preferred the governor to have been legally hoisted through the machinery of the State House of Assembly. And by any means, for a number of us who actually have some privileged information, that was what they were cooking on the side of Wike before the state of emergency was declared. It has been overtaken by issue, but it's still good to say that if that state of emergency was not declared and the House of Assembly succeeded in ousting him via impeachment, we could actually, like I said, it has been overtaken by events, but we could actually project that there will be a measure of crisis and to some extreme bloodletting in the oil-rich state, because I don't think those on the side of the governor will leave it lying low. They would have also fought back, and the instrument of fighting back in that instance would have been instrument of guns, instrument of violence. And many things he mentioned yesterday, not to talk about the grand rate itself that has generated a whole lot of hue and cry. But my position has always been the greatest contributors to the backwardness we have experienced in this country, our elite. They have houses in the UK, have houses in the United States, Canada, and a number of these countries. I've been privileged to travel to a number of countries, and I know how seriously they take taxation, things like the fiduciary obligation of citizens, especially citizens that have people who are usually exempted and given some leeway, are the poorest in the society. But how on earth can you have properties in Maitama, in Asokoro, and you don't pay the paltry amount you are supposed to pay as ground rent on your property, and you allow it to actually accumulate, some of them for 20 years, some for a decade and more? That itself is a slight on our system. How our system allowed those who are well-to-do to owe that much without taking any action. That, for me, tells you why we have had these challenges in our economy for many years. You can pity people who are living in Umpape. Some of us who are living in places like Kubwa, you can pity us. But people who live in the business district, some of these plazas, they are business concern, where the owners earn millions of naira every year, and they refuse to pay what was supposed to go to the government. And you can insult him, you can cast aspersion on him, but he has done the right thing in the interest of the country and the FCT.
Now, some of the issues in the PDP are down to the fact that they have failed to reach a consensus on their national scribe position. While it is a debate on what the Supreme Court's ruling is in that regard, it's also been tied to the FCT Minister's interest in that regard. He explicitly stated yesterday that he has made some sacrifice, even beyond those who are accusing him of being the root cause of the problem. Now, this also serves as one of the major blows in the PDP's hopes to challenge in the forthcoming election. Do you think that they will be able to put their house in order before their next national convention?
Brian, you know there is something I've always said about the PDP anytime we have to discuss this protracted crisis that was self-inflicted. And I think Wike also mentioned it, not speaking for Wike as it were, but that has been my position even before Wike made that statement. You see, when you are an opposition political party, you don't have the luxury of arrogance. You don't. A sitting or the incumbent, the ruling party, might have that measure of arrogance, where you can call the bluff of some stakeholders. But when you are in the minority, like we have seen, the National Assembly, you have minority, state governors, you have minority, and you are not the one sitting in the center. And you still act larger than life, the way we have seen in the PDP. Let's just backtrack a bit and go on some historical path. The major crisis that has bedeviled this party started before the 2023 presidential election. It actually started before the party's presidential primaries. The South was very loud. They were quite unequivocal on their position that the presidency after 8 years up north must come to the South. That was the basis of the crisis in the PDP. They continue this agitation. Eventually, the presidential primary came and it went north. Atiku emerged. And those in the South, the voice became only louder that, okay, the primary was about voting and the North has succeeded in winning. But why not give the party chairmanship position, zone it southwards, so that going into the elections, there will be balance of power. And by so doing, if because they know the humongous power that is available to the president in Nigeria's presidential system. So they were clear that if eventually their candidate wins the popular vote, the general election, it will be difficult to arm twist him to insist that South must produce the party's chairman, that they wanted that done before the election. The North again insisted that that will not happen, that they will only give that a thought after the presidential election. And you knew what happened. 5 of them, the G5 and other splinter groups who did not really join the G5, when some supported Labour Party, while the Wike camp, the G5 supported the incumbent, the APC candidate. Immediately after they lost the election, you will think everyone should now drop his big ego and now begin to think about how to now rebuild and be a very strong opposition for the ruling party. But that never happened. It's more than 2 years now since the general election. Atiku has stuck to his gun. Wike has stuck to his guns. The other groups, they have stuck to his gun. They have stuck to their guns. And what we see every day are tirades flying left, right, and center, front and back, on TVs, in the pages of newspapers. When you listen to the radio, you see PDP insulting PDP. The incumbent and the ruling party, they have their own differences, but you don't wake up every day in the papers seeing stakeholders within the party casting aspersion, insulting, hurling tirades at each other every other day. No political party, and I can tell you this for free, the secretary that has been the major problem of the party, the Makinde and other governors fashion, they are going to stick to their gun. Their faction will stick to their guns, and I can tell you this for free. Wike's group also, they will be unrelenting. And this secretary, this scribe issue, will continue till the next general election.
Well, it's a nice prediction. It's a nice prediction. We'll see how that pans out in the coming days.
It's going to continue, and you are going to see that a number of PDP candidates, if they are not careful, the Zamfara treatment, I think we saw it in which other state where people won election legally, they won election, the popular vote, but legal interpretation says the person who was supposed to sign and supposed to give them is not available. And that's why you saw a number of people now quickly decamping from the party, because they can see ahead that nobody wants to drop his ego and work for the interests of the party. And if this continues, it is the individual. Since we don't have independent candidacy for now, you still require the vehicle of the political party to be declared winners. And like Wike said yesterday, you require the signature of the recognized secretary. So if they continue as we are seeing it now, you are likely going to have two scribes, and the wrong person might be the one signing the forms. And after the elections, the court will interpret, and of course, it is not all post-electoral cases that get to Supreme Court. Before they will get the needed reprieve, many of their candidates would have been hoisted at the appellate court, and it is the candidate that will be the loser. And so that's why you see a lot of them jumping ship. And who will blame them, like Wiki said?
Now, this conversation has also taken a different twist. We've had prominent rulers, or should I say leaders in some sorts. The former VP, former Rivers Governor Amechi, former Kaduna Governor El-Rufai, all had strong words for the APC's economic policies. They used in quotes the catchphrase, weaponizing poverty, to describe President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's policies thus far. This morning, the APC is responding, calling the trio power hungry, that they are desperate to reclaim power. What do you make of the views of the trio in terms of their allegations on weaponizing poverty in their remarks of the APC's economic drive?
I think it's a beautiful sight to see. That's the beauty of democracy. If you follow democracy in other climes, these banters are normal. They are healthy for democracy. The moment you don't have dissenting views and opinion, you are probably running a tyrannical government. And so for me, I think it's a beautiful thing that we are beginning to see. We just finished discussing issues around the PDP. The PDP, as it were today, is the largest opposition political party. But because his house is in tatters, he's not been able to put himself together and give any semblance of opposition to the APC. So this trio, I'm beginning to enjoy the climate, the temperature they are actually presenting against the All Progressive Congress. Are they weaponizing poverty? I think the statistics are there to really show. But is it healthy to see respected voices at their own level? Because you hate them. I think Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, almost in the last 20 years, has shown to be a non-pushover political gladiator. The way and manner he's been able to put himself together, jumping from one political party and always being able to get their presidential ticket, says a whole lot. He was in the opposition for many years, trying to get the ticket. He couldn't get it. The ticket that produced Buhari as the presidential flag bearer of the party in 2015, he was a runner-up. He moved back to the PDP, and despite all the fight by people like Wike and several other heavyweights in the opposition PDP, he was able to re-roll his way. He still got their ticket. And I can tell you for free that if he actually wants to contest for the presidency again in 2027, whichever platform he decides to go to, he has the numbers to get the ticket. And so that tells you is no pushover. So when it speaks, he has a sizable following. Of course, the social media is also on fire. Supporters of El-Rufai and Amechi. But there is something that is a bit comical in the political landscape in Nigeria. Is the fact that people might be hurling insults at an individual for many years. The moment he tilts towards a side that they really like, suddenly he becomes a messiah. And that's for me the intriguing thing in all this issue. Somebody like Atiku Abubakar was in PDP for many years. He was the vice president in PDP for 8 years. And the poverty they are talking about, the figures were there to show us what poverty was like while he was the vice president. El-Rufai just left power about 2 years ago, exactly May 29th, 2 years ago. And his state was always in the news, not just for the level of banditry, terrorism, and killings going on, especially that was confined to the southern Kaduna part of that state, but also about the deprivation, the poverty level in Kaduna state. Of course, the trail, having Rotimi Amechi as governor of Rivers for 8 years, we also knew what went on under his leadership in Rivers State. And so I think there is something about our politicians in Nigeria. It's uncanny though, and I think it will be a good one for students of political science to study. How suddenly they know the right thing to do the moment they are out of power. But the statistics are there. The economy has not been rosy. The speech by the incumbent clearly shows that we have very serious challenges, especially when it comes to our economy. The inflation has been high, the purchasing power has been very high, has been very low due to the high prices, especially of food commodities across the length and breadth of the country. But will that be proper to use weaponizing poverty? That's why I really say the statistics really seems not to show that. Because even though these figures are high, we have seen in the past 2 years very serious efforts to ensure that the right economic policies that has brought us to this high level of poverty, we are taking away from it. And some of the statistics, the respected voices that give us statistics that we bandy around, IMF, World Bank, highly respected institutions like Financial Times and many of them, they have come out to say that the economic policies are actually the right thing, and that is a matter of time we begin to see a halt in the negative trajectory, and we begin to see a shift towards the positive trajectory. So that's why I said, even though that caption is catchy, the statistics really disagree with that submission.
Now let's look at some of the recent interventions of the government. Yesterday, the president of the World Cocoa Forum met with Vice President Shettima at the presidential villa, and conversations were ongoing about how to actively move the needle in Nigeria's value addition, particularly in cocoa processing, and conversations on the need for a $25 billion gas pipeline to drive the economy, particularly in regards to undersea cables, one that leads from Nigeria to Europe. Reacting to this story, some Nigerians are saying that it is indeed time to walk the talk away from the handshaking ceremony on these initiatives. Where do you stand in that regard? It's
actually a sorry situation that at this time we are still talking about value addition to cocoa. And these initiatives are actually not novel, like I like saying. Successive administration tells you it wants to add value instead of exporting raw materials across the borders. But we have seen that we are very high on theories, very low on actual practice. So I really don't applaud such initiatives again, where we do the talk. I want to begin to see deliberate government efforts. You know, it was in the news a few weeks ago when the FEC approved Nigerian First. And one of the components of Nigerian First is to discourage this culture of exporting our raw materials without adding values. We sell these raw materials at very cheap, ridiculous prices, and when values are added in other climes, they export them back here. We import them into the country at very high and sometimes sorry prices. And so we had a state under the late legal luminary in Ondo State, Akeredolu. He opened a chocolate company in Ondo State at some point, and we began to see their products across shelves in the length and breadth of the country. At least I bought their product once in Lagos, and here in Abuja a few times. I'd actually walked into high value chain stores, and I bought those products. But like 2 years now, I've been asking questions why the factory has not been producing optimally the way they were doing. And it was sorry story that we're hearing from that company in Ondo State. So why not other states borrow relief? We begin to deliberately add values to our raw materials. And it's also the time to cry again. That it seems the focus is always on the federal government. And there are things that federal government can only make policy statements. The actual practice, we have to begin with governors having that willingness to key. Because if you talk about Nigerian first, and a component is value addition to raw materials, is actually not economically viable for the federal government to be the ones superintending over the opening of factories. That should be the job of governors and local government chairmen in the other 2 tiers of government. But we are not seeing state governors doing things in this direction. What we see them is they wear suit and tie, travel abroad, start talking about how they can come and partner with them. They take photo shots, and 4 years later, you really don't see anything happening. If anything happens, when the governor leaves office, you see those companies again disappear from Nigeria. So in the first instance, it's got to bring people in under the guise of we are bringing foreign investors. We have to do things differently. And about the under cable pipeline, many nations had benefited. Nations like Algeria, like Morocco on the continent of Africa, they had benefited from that. And so why not Nigeria? And Europe is actually confronted with a major situation where their major gas supplier, which is of course Russia, they are in a running battle for over 3 years now due to the war ongoing in Ukraine. So they have been looking for alternatives. And I just think this is the right time for us to present ourselves as that alternative that they require. So that's the right thing to do, but we must go beyond talking, and let's begin to see actual practice of some of these things.
And moving on to another issue in the news, it's still conversations on how Nigeria can upscale revenue from the upstream sector. This morning, reports as that the federal government has issued a new executive order on upstream, looking to prioritize oil and gas production. What's it for you in terms of our approach to these conversations? Nigerians continue to lament the fact that our oil prices are still detected by the global community despite we being an oil-producing nation. Does this new executive order look to change that focus in your perspective?
Thank you. I think it's a subject I am seriously interested in. Unfortunately, it was 2 days ago I saw that, and I was just gathering material so that I can dive deep into it and have a greater depth about that. But from the little things I read, I've not really read details about the executive order, but I learned that upstream, the foreign companies involved, of course, who are the major, they are the dominant players in oil prospecting here. Even though we had the agreement, partnership with local industries, but the money, the percentage of equity, they still contribute the highest. But what I read from the surface idea I gathered from what I studied about it was that we have always been on the losing side, because in the contractual agreement, there are many things inserted in it that require us to pander more to what's happening in the international market as against our own domestic reality here. So one of the interventions, and thanks to the essay on that sector, can't recollect her name now, but she's been doing a very beautiful job since she assumed that office. She was the one who was able to pick on some of those loopholes that put us in a disadvantaged position. Sometimes one of the topical issues under Buhari's administration that we became deeply indebted at some point was the repatriation of airline funds. It was a thorny issue throughout the 8 years tenure of Muhammadu Buhari. Is also due in part to the technical part of it, where we will need to, pay these people based on some realities that are within our control. In the oil sector, you also have that. For instance, if you are paying them, you pay using the dollar rates at some that is not within our control here. You will use the price of fuel at the prevailing international market rate, and even in repatriating their funds, some of the technical financial issues involved there will require you to still use what is not within our control. So the new executive order now require a whole lot of those things to be revised in our favor, and I think it's kudos to the government. Because all in all, this is a period where we require all the finances for the various infrastructural projects that have been rolled out by the government, and every hole we can plug where we have been wasting our resources, where we've been having leakages in our foreign exchange transaction. This is the right time to plug those holes so that we can have all the resources needed for development of our country.
Now, moving on, let's also quickly run to another issue. Quite sadly, it's the conversation that many hoped the Ministry of Livestock would attend to in terms of what it was mandated to do, reduce the amounts of header farmers' conflicts. But the conversation is taking a different twist. Allegations of ethnic cleansing are being pushed into the media by the communities affected by persistent onslaughts. I can't count if this is the 4th or 5th time it has happened, but again we're told that communities in Benue State have been attacked to the point that Catholic priests in Benue have decided to close 15 parishes. It's so sad that we hear 48 farmers have been left dead, with families having to bury as much as 11 of their members in one day. I don't know if it's beyond conversations on how to curb this persistent killings in Benue particularly. It's been in Plateau, it has now moved to Benue. In your view, Mr. Seun, how do we attend to this issue?
It's a sad situation. That was actually our headline yesterday, and one of the things I realized as a person while we're working on this story is that our security architecture seems to be aloof, because we saw how the killings in Plateau, for instance, wrapped up some few weeks ago until there was a national condemnation. Every newspaper, every TV station, every radio station, that became a topical issue. It became the trend, and suddenly we saw them, they moved in and halted the situation. And so it tells you that that plan was not all encompassing, because simply what happened now is that they were able to douse the tension on the Plateau, and the same thing has now upped its ante in Benue. So that itself tells you about a failure in our security architecture. And that's where I actually want us to put the focus, because if we are not careful, we will turn security issue into a political discussion. This is purely a security breach. The reason why we have our armed forces deployed thinly across the country is so that they can support the civil policing authorities, who have been rendered almost helpless and helpless. And so their job is to go there as the first mover. And by their trainings, they have the ability to push back on this level of violence that have been besieged on Benue State. We are not seeing that happen. It took the Catholic Church to come and scream Blue Murder before people start picking it. And of course, you and I know the reason. The state is under the same political umbrella as the federal government. So the way and manner they respond and they cry about this bloodlet in Benue, it's not the same way that Plateau actually screamed when it happened on the Plateau. Because of course, Governor Caleb Mutang of Plateau is of the PDP. So quickly, he's in the news, he calls press briefing, and he quickly lays out all the facts. But on the Benue, there seems to be a cover-up and unusual silence on the part of this of the political leadership in the state. It took the intervention of the Catholic Church for us to know about this level of crime in the state. One of the riders yesterday was that about 20 local governments are actually under this attack, this incessant attack. And the political leadership is quiet and silent about it. So what do they want to gain? Playing politics with loss of life. 48. That is many lives that shouldn't have been lost in the first place. So this is a clarion call on our security architecture. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the NSA, all the security involved, even the police. They need to do things differently to ensure that this bloodlet on the Plateau is hot permanently this time around.
Now, let's move on to the headline on your newspaper. It's not the first time that the word accidental bombing has been used to describe sad civilian casualties in the efforts of the Nigerian armed forces. I know the debate has been whether the bandits use humans as shields in their operation, but your newspaper chooses the word, I'm looking for it now, your headline, the word used to describe it is reckless as against accidental. Why is this so?
Well, it was not actually our coinage. It was Amnesty International's coinage. We just simply, we saw that they used it in good faith. Bear in mind the foundation you just gave. It happened in Kaduna. The Air Force apologized that it was a mistake. It happened later on in Sokoto. They apologized that it was a mistake. It happened somewhere again in Borno State. You apologize that it's a mistake. Now it's happening again in Zamfara. Certainly that can be a mistake again. You can actually use the right word, and the right word is actually reckless. There is no point going on a military interdiction like we have seen. Great work they are doing, but you can't go and bomb villagers, bomb locals. That is what we call double jeopardy. Terrorists have not allowed them to do their jobs. Terrorists have not allowed those who are farming to farm. And yet, the security people who are supposed to come to their aid now treat them into mourning. That's double jeopardy. That's reckless. And our Air Force will need to go back and work more on his protocol, because that simply shows you that something is wrong with his protocol. How he identifies spots where he needs to go and carry out interdictions. And like Amnesty rightly put it in their message to the military authority. They need to go back, investigate what actually happened, and must ensure that they work on their protocol in such a way and manner that we don't have a loss of life, innocent people, when they go on this military operation. You know, there was a time this thing happened, and the military first were in denial. They were denying until it became obvious that there is no point denying this issue. It happened. They came, apologized, went to the community, and performed some CSR to win the heart of these people. And that, for me, is a major issue, because you are talking about people who, over a very long time, have not been providing the much needed intel for our security to work with. And we are just trying to work to see how we can win and gain their confidence. And you now threw them into mourning. Then you will just destroy the level of trust that they have in you. That's why it's serious that this level of recklessness is not repeated again.